by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. Ah, how sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead. Where the thin blue line meets razor's edge. And where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death and drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections step by step till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs. All laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer, that 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. just turns blind if the signs on red. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see it in its bed. Never you'll mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, that it bleeds you dry, that it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. False alarm, I thought that help was here. But it was my own reassurance bouncing round 100,000 times in my own ecosphere. If every time you speak you keep it off the record, consequently you can keep your record clear. And if you mute the speech that shakes your frail beliefs, you only seek to insulate your image and continue down the stream in the direction clout and credit steers. Directly from your mouth into am I the asshole Reddit's ears. Directly back into the greasy pockets of some Gates Foundation financiers. And then directly back into the frantic final thoughts of early trial Neuralink volunteers, staring at the numb and mumbling vacancies where recently had been their peers. Half of whom are glitching with the memory stuck on pause, and half have zero fucking clue just who they are or why they're here. It's been said that fear is all we have to fear, but that was back before the basosphere condenser came along, distilling concentrated fear that's diamond pure, crystal clear, oppressor strong, and woven into every single article you read and song they let you hear. And then Elon heard that Jeff enhanced our fears by 86%, and he said, hold my beer. And not a single sheep among the herd would turn their head or say a word, cause they were all too busy begging for the shears, begging for the muzzle, happy just to guzzle, feed, and watch a screen for all their years. Man, to each his own, can't afford a home, but they'll let you have your cozy little ecosphere. Where there among your own devices you can break the seventh seal, overthrow the oracles and slay the seer. All the tomes were burned and all the lips were seared. Shut your eyes and all our lives just disappear. Now blink 'em twice. Welcome to your ecosphere.
When you are not with where majority of Americans are, then, you know, that is extreme. That is an extreme way of thinking.
Set you free, but I really want to let you be. And a part of me wished I could set myself aside, just let you take the ride, just chalk the rest up to destiny. I could let you believe that the only restraints in life are the size of your dreams. Let you believe each kid grows up with the world at their feet. when I know too well it's open season. I know they're taking stock and raising stocks and raising stock. And I'm simply not here to sit and watch as you learn the lesson all cogs are taught. Keep your head down and keep to task and just keep on blocking the rest of it all out. Just keep on with the rest of the herd of a million adjacent oblivious workers. The forest unseen for the trees, and the trees unseen for the fallout. Now what's more damning, baby, the truth or the ignorance? Fuck it, I honestly wonder if I see the answer so well. Baby, believe me, well, I know it's scary, I scare myself. If I could find a way out of my head, I would run like hell. I would ditch this body politic, mindless occupant somewhere far from the dismal abyss. In the tranquil crystalline bliss of the beach, I could rest with the rest of the shells. And if anyone asks I'm anywhere else, if I'm really needed, just light the candle, then read the book, and then ring the bell. Oh, my untarnished heart, my little perfect soul. This world will melt your mercy down so they can sell its gold. This world will take your worth and then demand 1,000-fold. It's full of greedy pigs who'll eat you out of house and home. They'll strip your bank account and sweep you somewhere down the road, and then return to eat your tent and shitty bike you rode. Your bottled water, only shoes and coat and broken phone. Then smiling in your face, they'll tell you that the shelter's closed.
When you are not with where majority of Americans are, then, you know, that is extreme. That is an extreme way of thinking.
Hoped you would never find out, knew that you had to know. Pulling what's left of my mind out, trying to tell you so. I tried to block the light out, knew you could feel its glow. I bet you're holding my hands out, trying to keep you close. Trying to keep you Oh, my untarnished heart, my little perfect soul. This world will melt your mercy down so they can sell its gold. This world will take your worth, then demand 1,000-fold. I tried to block the light just so I could keep you close.
We want to have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Who are these people?
It's us. We're these people.
I love that intro. I love that intro so much.
I'm here with a different co-host this time, Oz LaFave.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on.
Friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. How are you, friend?
What's good? And you hear Nick say this all the time. The United States is the most propagandized country in the world.
We are so fucked, you guys. Again, I'm sorry for being cynical, but seriously, we're fucked. We are fucked. We are well and truly fucking fucked.
Just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing.
Hey, you. Doing good. How are you guys doing?
And as independent media, we have a responsibility to be, we don't hide our bias, obviously, but we must stay true to the facts.
What's up, Pam?
Cheers and salutations. Smoke if you got them.
But I am here with a man that I've been waiting to talk to for the last couple of years, Nico House.
As an educator, what I would suggest is that, first of all, podcasts like these are made.
So you need to be an example for the people and for the future, knowing that your words can actually change the future.
What do you feel? What would Kwame Ture feel we would have to do?
Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on. Not voting on one day, so the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat.
See, I would call that guy the Black Obama.
No. The issues that we talk about, listen to us.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
In news.
in news is us. I know Collin loves that ending. It's his favorite part of the video. You know? But
I'm just
anyways,
gonna move on.
move on.
It is
Moving
Wednesday,
on.
my dudes.
It's Wednesday. It's time for Iron and News, everybody. With me, Reef Breland, and Collin. Collin's back. We had Yeti here replacing him the other day. Last
Shout out to
Wednesday.
Yeti for covering for me when I was on vacation. So shout out to him. Thank you. But yeah, I'm back. As you guys probably see, I got some new furniture and did some cleaning. So hopefully within the next month, you'll actually see no more boxes anymore as I start getting things ready. But yeah, I actually have a little more cozy in here now. So
Nice.
yeah.
You got your little love seat, looking good.
I have a little love seat that I spent way too much money for, but it's worth it. Just to make it a little nicer and more comfortable in here and not as barren as it was.
Yep.
So yeah.
Well,
just those two lawn chairs there for the last few months.
Thanks for those who are here and not watching other things. We appreciate you.
We know that we're in severe competition right now, but appreciate you guys being here. It's probably going to be a light night, but
tell your friends to come watch after they watched other stuff. You know, always useful.
And definitely watch our clips after this if you guys, or watch the playback of the live stream after.
You know,
if you
share the stream, like the stream. If you're new here, we'd love for you to stick around.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. You know, please subscribe.
So please whatever.
You know, like the stream. Share it out. You know, do all the things that you're supposed to be doing. Hit the bells. And we appreciate any financial support you give too. Multiple ways to do that. Not that you have to. You know, we know how it is.
Not that you have to. As I say every week, please take care of yourselves, your family, your community first before you give to us. But if you have any extra money to spare, so we're able to kind of continue to grow the network, continue to give you more content, we would highly probably appreciate it and love you. But at minimum, please share our stuff. If financially you are strapped, which we more than understand. For many folks, that is the case right now. But yeah, it's been over a week for me to do this, so I'm ready if you are.
Yeah, I'm pretty much ready.
Okay, so while we pulls up our main screen, so this is a local story for me, but I feel there is some not great implications in terms of the potential of what this could mean in other cities as well, especially how they deal with the rising crime that we have been seeing in many cities throughout the country. So I'm actually going to get more into this. And this is probably something I'm probably going to be watching closely moving forward, as it does relate to other issues, especially connected to education as well. You'll figure out why as we get into it. And then I thought I was done talking about student loan debt. I keep saying that, at least, not needing to talk about it at least for a hot minute, but then we brought this up. And this is probably not going to be talked about at all, but we have a person who the clue is actually on the screen, but a person that we've talked about a few times on this show regarding their implications regarding why we do not have student loan debt canceled, and it's not Republicans, and it's not necessarily the Supreme Court, as people online and otherwise have been telling you. So we'll get more into that later. What do you have, Reef?
Well, I've got some reporting that I think a lot of people also missed. The White House put out a statement on this committee hearing that's been looking into essentially corruption of the FBI in regards to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Google. Censoring for the SBU. So we'll talk about that. And you know, BRICS countries, the new BRICS countries. You know, we got some new ones joining the battle. So, you know, interesting stuff.
Listen to chat if you know the flags of those countries at the bottom there.
Yeah, see if people can figure that out. I know the first two. The third one, I was like, oh, that's a nice flag. I haven't seen that one. You know.
Right.
So, but anyway, you ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
So we're gonna start off. For me, as I said earlier, this is a local story. But as I said, the implications, you know, in terms of what DC is doing, could have an effect, I would argue, in other cities as well, depending on how successful this is. So this has been a talk about for DC for the last few months, I would say. But yesterday, the DC Council voted to pass what they call a public safety bill, but it's known colloquially here as the crime bill. So this has been somewhat controversial, and attitudes about this bill are very mixed, and you can probably guess as to why. But I do want to kind of give information about it because I definitely have some thoughts on it. And like I said, in terms of thinking about this, obviously this is a local story for me. But what I was sharing with you earlier and what I was sharing with Indy earlier this afternoon, this could be a bad, this kind of shows that we're kind of going backwards in terms of thinking in terms of how we deal with crime overall in this country, but also the implications of this, you know, you could see this potentially in other cities as well, depending on the situation of how they deal with crime.
Right.
You know, in other places around the country. So I think this could mark of a statute that may not be good in terms of how we deal with crime in the country in general and who this affects. And you can probably guess who this will mostly affect. So this is from not New York Times, Washington Post. Article written by Megan Flynn and Pete Herman, where they write DC Council passes emergency public safety legislation, which the idea, like how they phrase it, is like public safety, like, you know, so we got to clean it up a little bit, you know, just to make it a little more manageable for the rich folks. But they write, the DC Council yesterday passed emergency public safety legislation as the city weathers a violent summer, establishing a new crime for firing a gun in public and making it easier for judges to detain people charged with violent crimes before trial, a provision that drew extended debate. The legislation proposed by Councilmember Brooke Pinto passed 12-1 with opposition from Councilmember Janice Lewis George. It will be in effect for 90 days after the mayor signs it. Pinto's bill is similar to a proposal put forth by Mayor Muriel E. Bowser that lawmakers are expected to debate in the fall, but Pinto said some provisions could not wait as the city confronts rising homicides and carjackings. This legislation today is a major step forward in our effort to create a safer DC for all residents, and it cannot wait, Pinto said. I want to say to families, businesses, partners of the district, we hear you, and we know we need to do more to keep you safe. Pinto's proposition garnered broad support despite escalating tension between the Bowser administration and members of the DC Council, particularly Chairman Phil Mendelssohn, about who is to blame for the rising crime in DC and what should be done to reduce it. Mendelssohn reiterated Tuesday that he believes police improving their closure rates and prosecutors acting more aggressively would have a more significant impact on crime than any council legislation. But he said he was tired of a public perception, which he said was perpetuated by the mayor, that the DC Council wasn't taking crime seriously. Hold on to that.
Okay.
Bowser had taken aim at the council a day earlier, noting a previous vote to cut the police department's budget several years ago. I'm angry, and I'm angry because the council is being blamed, Mendelssohn said, describing a perception that the council does not care. I think there are things the mayor can do outside legislation with regard to public safety, and she's not doing it. Today's legislation is useful, and let me be clear, I am not criticizing the police. But what angers me is I think our citizenry is being misled. Crime fighting is primarily a function of the executive branch, the police, and other law enforcement agencies. Council member Nadine K. Nadeau echoed Mendelssohn's remarks. Bowser, she suggested, can ask DC police why they're not patrolling equitably across the city, or provide data on what they're doing, or ask why the U.S. attorney is declining 2/3 of cases. I want to reiterate, this council is united in addressing public safety issues and will continue to do it. So, thoughts so far?
I mean, they're gonna throw stop and frisk in this too, or?
No. No. But the idea is just given that.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the issue with Bowser. We had a couple of DC Council members who were not, they said it, they feel like she's not doing enough.
Right.
But yet still this bill was, and I'll talk more about it later, but essentially this bill was basically forced through quickly. So the vote happened yesterday, and there really hasn't been a lot of discussion on it, publicly in terms of, what the council was planning to do in regard to the rising crime rate in the city. And I would argue there are reasons why crime is rising, but those issues are not necessarily being addressed.
Yeah.
But we'll get more into that later. So
okay.
To continue. A spokeswoman for Bowser did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the criticisms leveled at the mayor. For her part, Bowser celebrated the passage of the legislation. Our community is in agreement that the status quo is unacceptable, she said in a statement, added that no one should be afraid to let their children play outside or walk to the bus stop for fear of crime. The legislation that the council passed today will fill gaps in our criminal justice system, and in doing so will increase accountability for violent and criminal behavior and make our cities safer. Despite some frustration at Bowser, council members said they were united on the need to take urgent action as violence escalates in its city. They agreed with almost all provisions of Pinto's legislation, with the exception of one impassioned objection from Louis George to changes regarding pretrial detention. Mendelssohn and other members who initially voiced skepticism about Bowser's legislation, dubbed Safer, Stronger, warned to Pinto's similar proposal as she narrowed some provisions involving pretrial detention for juveniles and changed or eliminated others. Bowser, who had described Pinto's bill as retaining the heart of the bill, had urged the council to support it. Pinto's bill, the Prioritizing Public Safety Emergency Amendment Act, expands access to private security cameras through an incentive program and allows pretrial GPS monitoring data to be used in evidence against defendants among several other provisions. So what does that sound like to you?
I mean, safer, stronger sounds dumb already.
Right. But the idea of expanding access to private security cameras through an incentive program.
Yeah, that sounds like surveillance is what it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yes.
Surveillance is a thing.
Surveillance is a thing.
So,
It also creates new crimes, including endangerment with a firearm and then strangulation offense. Such charges had previously been included in the revised Criminal Code Act that Congress blocked from going into effect. But the provisions that drew the most debate centered on the circumstances under which defendants could be detained as they await trial. Pinto's proposal would have judges presume that adults charged with violent crimes and juveniles charged with certain offenses should be detained. Defendants would have an opportunity to argue against that determination, with Pinto stressing that judges are not mandated to detain anyone. So,
what is the point at all?
Right, what is the point at all? What about the idea of due process?
No, essentially he's put the due process in the hands of a judge. That's what he's done.
Right. Well, she.
Yes.
She.
It's the judge gets to decide whether you stay in jail or not here.
Right.
Or can leave.
Louis George proposed an amendment which failed, striking the entire provision that would create a presumption that adults charged with violent offenses be detained pre-trial, saying it needed more time and scrutiny. Louis George pointed to pre-trial data and suggested the legislation will not substantially help reduce crime. According to a December report from the Pretrial Services Agency, 88% of adults released pretrial remained arrest-free over the last 5 years, and under 2% were charged with a violent offense while out. Louis George argued that during the meeting Tuesday that expanded a presumption of pretrial detention to all violent crimes would mark a dramatic change to the district's law, repeating mistakes of the tough on crime past and depriving defendants of due process.
Yes, what you
The
said.
The current law only has judges apply that presumption in particular circumstances, such as cases in which a person is charged with committing a violent or dangerous offense while armed or out awaiting trial in another case. Otherwise, a judge must find clear and convicting evidence that keeps a person in jail is the only way to keep the community safe and ensure their appearance at trial. So, as you said, basically, the judge can put them in jail really for whatever reason, and they don't necessarily have to have all the evidence in order to prove it. So, what happens when you're locked up pre-trial? You have the potential of losing housing. If you're a parent, you have the potential of your children being taken from you. If you have a job, you have the potential of being fired, Louis George said. All I'm asking for my colleagues to do, we can address this on a permanent basis, but the evidence does not suggest we need to do this on an emergency basis. Councilmember Matthew Furin similarly said that he worried Pinto's proposal was casting an overbroad net by expanding the pretrial detention presumption to all violent crimes, and that it was all happening too fast. He suggested the legislation should focus on crimes that were on the rise, but he ultimately opposed Louis George's amendment and voted for the legislation anyway.
Oh, of course he did. Okay.
This really is a hard one, he said. I have quite a lot of sympathy for the argument that Janice Louis George was making, but I also do think I wish we were not doing this on an emergency basis, but as an emergency. Okay. Only one council member. Don't worry, I'm going to get into this.
Okay.
Only one council member, Vincent C. Gray, participating virtually and without commenting on his position, supported Louis George amendment. Pinto's proposal went further than the mayor's Safety Stronger bill with respect to expanding pretrial detention. The mayor's proposal would have expanded the presumption of pretrial detention to cases in which a person with a violent criminal conviction was charged with a new violent offense.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just. Yep.
But Pinto's proposal called for more limited pretrial detention of juveniles compared with Bowser's, assuaging some of the objections to the mayor's legislation.
Wait.
No.
Bowser wanted juveniles to be detained pre-trial in virtually all cases.
Yes.
To be detained pre-trial. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Sure. Okay.
Bowser wanted juveniles to be detained pre-trial in virtually all cases in which a judge found substantial probability they committed a violent or dangerous crime, regardless of whether the juvenile was alleged to be armed, as the law now requires. In perhaps the most controversial provision, the mayor proposed detaining juveniles in some cases for their own protection, even if they pose no danger to the community. DC Attorney General Brian L. Schwab argued the proposal was not backed up by data and will not make the community safer, though on Tuesday he celebrated Pinto's legislation as better and more targeted.
Well, we're boned.
Pinto's emergency bill added only specific crimes for which children would face a presumption of pretrial detention if they were not accused of being armed. Those crimes include murder, first-degree sexual assault, carjacking, or assault with intent to commit any of those offenses. Juveniles would also face a presumption of pretrial detention if they were charged with committing a violent offense while armed.
Yeah.
The DC Police Union, which has lambasted the council as anti-police after it passed the sweeping police reform bill, applauded passage of the legislation on Tuesday and Pinto's leadership of it.
Well, you know what that means. Like, if the cops like it, you know.
Well, don't worry. I'm going to tear this apart.
Yeah.
Well, you can figure that anyway. It is a breath of fresh air to see the city council actually introducing and passing some common sense, logical bills that move in the direction of holding criminals accountable, the chairman, Gregory Penterton, said in a statement. Passage of the legislation comes as the district continues to struggle with violent crime, up 33% this year over last, driven by spikes in homicides and robberies. Carjackings also continue to rise. 140 incidents in June were the most in a single month in at least 5 years. Crime during the pandemic rose in cities across the country and has started to drop recently in some categories, though it has not fully retreated to levels before coronavirus-related shutdowns. DC is bucking the trend.
Oh, God. Okay.
Police in DC said the city has recorded 129 homicides this year, up 17% from this time last year. The city is on pace for 200 or more homicides for the first consecutive year and is moving close to what might be the highest yearly total in 2 decades. Killings, meanwhile, have fallen in Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and Baltimore. Okay, actually, so we'll stop there for a second. So, so that was a lot to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are your thoughts?
I mean,
there's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, they want to detain minors. Like, this, of course, all in legal speak, right? So it's like politician speak, right? So it's like detained in pretrial. That could mean quite a bit of stuff, you know. What does that entail specifically for them? I don't quite know, but you know, I imagine it involves steel bars and a key of some degree. Right. So now, granted, they're prefacing it with violent crimes, right? But essentially, they also allowed the judge to detain you for anything,
right?
Regardless of if it's a violent crime or not. And he doesn't even have to hold you for a violent crime. He can decide to not. So when do you get it? The issue is when do you, this is pre-trial, right? So when do they even give you a judge to decide whether to be detained or not? So then they're going to have to detain you for anything, like, until that's figured out, right? I don't know. There's a lot of like unanswered questions on this, so I'll be interested to see what like pre-conviction, pre-trial, like whatever they're deeming this to be part of. But yeah, it's very crime billy, like 3 strikes, go to federal prison, do not collect $200, you know.
I'm going to jail.
Like just straight to jail, pretty much.
Yeah, that's basically what it is, to me, at least that section of the bill.
Yeah.
But 2 things for me that just kind of came out of this.
Yeah.
This is a backlash to defund the police.
Sure.
Straight up. This is an immediate backlash, I think, especially from DC police and probably some other folks who were pressured to move away from that.
Yeah.
So, so this is, and they're kind of faulting the defund the police movement in terms of,
well, that's the reason why crime has risen, but
Guess what, bitch? Coronavirus.
Right. Like we're not talking about the idea of, that one, we're in a pandemic, and 2, we're in the middle, and I'm going to keep saying it. We are basically in a recession. Like people are saying we're not in a recession yet. I'll argue we're in.
We might be in worse. We might be in worse than that.
Right.
They just don't talk about it. Like all those things that you hear when we had the last recession about banks giving money to particular things. Congress made it to where they don't have to ask anymore, and they don't have to tell us that they do that anymore. But they're doing it almost all the time. Like what is that called? Quantitative easing. Right? Like that's what's happening. They're giving billions and billions of dollars to the banks. Like right now because of that. Just to fudge the numbers. Printing money. Money printer go burr.
This is a straight up this is a hard backlash regarding defund the police movement, number 1. Number 2, this whole thing, and I said this to you earlier, like before we went live, this gives me 90s crime bill vibes to me.
Oh yeah.
This whole thing. And I'll say why, just given history, in terms of what they're proposing and how they went about it. Because like I said, this was done as an emergency legislation that they did it yesterday because they went on the council went on summer recess starting today. So they wanted to get this done before they essentially get on vacation. And shout out to Money Oakley. I know she did a video on this regarding student debt, but what she was kind of saying kind of applies here.
Yeah.
Whenever politicians want to push legislation that they know is not going to be popular with the public, they'll do it at an inconvenient time.
Yeah.
So in this case, they did it I wouldn't say last minute, but they marked it as an emergency the day before that they went on summer recess and during the summer when many people are on vacation. So they're not going to not enough people were going to be around to really critique and call out a lot of this stuff publicly.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
So they just rushed it through without really going through, I think, the proper details and channels and speaking to the right research and doing the right research. Actually, I would argue they probably did. They just didn't care about it because they were looking for political expediency. Because I'm fairly sure a lot of this stems from the idea, like, the lower income wars have been complaining about crime probably since a tale as old as time. But it's now getting to the point where the richer wards are seeing some of this and they're making noise about it. So this is more a political expediency to kind of say, oh, we did something. We're solving the problem. which is just a band-aid in terms of you're not really addressing the true issues here.
And hasn't DC been one of the highest paid police like groups in the country? Like,
I can't say for sure,
I think I heard Afeni say that at one point.
Yes.
You know?
It wouldn't surprise me if that's the case.
Yeah.
So I just happened to get this article. I'm not going to read all of it, but this is from the Center for American Progress. Didn't think I would ever read anything for the Center for American Progress. Written by Ed Chung. So he wrote this 4 years ago, where he writes, the 1994 crime bill continues to undercut justice reform. Here's how to stop it. So he wrote, come on.
No, I'm going to zoom this.
There we go. Yes, you do. The legacy of the Violent Crime Control Act and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, better known as the Crime Bill, has reemerged in the national debate around criminal justice reform and public safety. Keep in mind, this was written back in 2019.
Right.
Many consider the Crime Bill to be one of the cornerstone statutes that accelerated mass incarceration. But the law's negative effects did not end there. States and localities were incentivized for a massive infusion of federal funding to build more jails and prisons and to pass so-called truth in sentencing laws and other punitive measures that simultaneously increase the number and length of prison sentences while reducing the possibility of early release for those incarcerated. It has been well documented that these policies were failures. The cost to society came not only from the staggering amount of taxpayer dollars that were invested in enforcement, but also from the disproportionate incarceration of a generation of African American men in the name of public safety.
Thanks,
Moreover, tough on crime measures, specifically longer incarceration sentences, have at best a marginal effect on improving public safety. Elected leaders today are attempting to unwind some of the most harmful effects of the crime bill through criminal justice reform measures. As part of that reform effort, a number of cities have pursued public health models and community-based strategies alongside innovative policing approaches. However, the effectiveness of those efforts have been and will continue to be muted because the machinery that the crime bill created and persevered has never stopped churning. The same funding streams that overwhelm support enforcement activities, overproven preventative and restorative solutions continue to this day, albeit with tweaks around the edges.
Mm-hmm.
States still look to build new jails and prison facilities, even as crime rates remain near historic lows. At the same time, Congress continues to advocate for new criminal statutes and higher criminal penalties, even as it proposes to lower some of the mandatory minimum sentences.
Yep.
So I read all of that because in light of this, and what I'm going to say here is very speculative. I can't confirm this. I don't know this to be true. My guess is, especially given that it was almost unanimous that the DC Council voted for this bill, even as we said in the article, some people had issues with it. I have to wonder and question whether there was or is a financial incentive for them to do
it. Absolutely.
I have to wonder that. And as I said, given what we know from the 1994 crime bill, it stands to reason to me that they were under, and this is why I said to you off camera.
Right.
So I'll say it here. And again, this is speculation. The real estate industry in DC is very powerful. Right now, and I'm not going to say where I live, but I live in one of the more gentrified neighborhoods in DC currently.
It's free real estate.
But a lot of that real estate a lot of that development now is moving east. Now, if you live in DC, we have an area called east of the river. When you say east of the river, that basically means colloquially the hood.
Yeah.
So right now, a lot of the development is starting to trickle into those neighborhoods. And I'm sure that many of these real estate development companies do not want that crime there in order to lower the investments that they're making. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of this is based on corporate interest in terms of the development that is occurring in the city, that basically I'll say it, bribed Bowser to be like, take care of this. And basically the other councilmen basically followed suit because they don't want that backlash necessarily, from the community or from these corporate donors. And only one woman had the balls to actually say no. So, and even online, I'm beginning to see that people, because she's up for re-election this year, that there are a lot of people now that are kind of calling for her head right now because she voted against this bill. So, so that's why I'm thinking that there is a lot more to this than what the Washington Post is saying. And again, what I said.
Well, and this is also, it's also election cycles coming up, right? When's Mayor Bowser up for re-election?
She just got reelected this past fall. So she's pretty much good, but that doesn't.
Now she's got to pay off her debts pretty much.
Right.
Yeah. So that's also the case. I figured it was one of those things where it's like, I got to appear like I'm dealing with crime by doing this stuff, So, but it's just being super greedy.
You greedy dirtbag!
Greedy as shit.
Yeah. So this brings me no pleasure to doing this, but so yesterday after this vote, got an email from one of our councilmen, Zachary Parker. Zachary, I actually once upon a time, I lived in the apartment building that he also lived. Actually, we lived down the hall from each other. I volunteered for his campaign when he was running for the State Board of Ed. So that's my relationship to him. So he knows who I am, and I've spoken about the education issues in DC over the last few years for Power Ed, so he's very familiar with who I am. He just got elected to councilman this past fall. He was one of the people that did vote for this bill, which upset quite a few people in his ward. So he came out with this email yesterday, I guess, to do some damage control. And I'm sorry to say it, but this is what this seems like to me. So I'm going to read part of it, because now he's kind of he's basically trying to justify why he voted this way.
Right.
So he writes, there has been a lot of confusion about the Prioritizing Public Safety Emergency Amendment Act of 2023. So I wanted to take this opportunity to explain what it is, what it's not, and why I voted for it. First, the legislation is not the same as the Safer, Stronger legislation proposed by the mayor, although it includes some provisions from the mayor's bill. I mean, yeah.
Sure.
Rather, the bill we voted on today is modest and targeted. That remains to be seen.
Yeah, it can be sweeping, depending on the precedent.
It focuses on significant gaps or challenges presented by existing law. Second, this legislation has changed significantly since Councilmember Pinto reintroduced it last Thursday. So keep that in mind. This was introduced last week and was voted on yesterday.
Yeah, that's fast.
In
government time.
I mean, that local government, even just like
yeah.
But this just kind of shows, again, this is local politics. But if they want something done, anything that they want to have done that benefits them or their donors, it will go through real quick. Anything that is done in relative to us,
wait a long periodically time.
Thank you. Right. Anyway, continue. Can you zoom in, please?
Yeah. There we go.
Did I read the second part?
Maybe. Yes.
Zoom in.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. Oh yeah. Well, I didn't finish it. Second, this legislation has changed significantly since the council member Pinto introduced it last week. I was originally concerned about the section modifying standards for the pretrial detention of juveniles being too broad. In partnership with colleagues, I worked with council member Pinto to focus this section only on the most violent offenses. I also voted for amendments to the bill offered by council members Robert Wright and Charles Allen that improved the legislation with regards to the district's crime-related data collection efforts.
Okay. Is it clear? There you go.
There we go. Third, the legislation is an emergency legislation, meaning that it is limited to 90 days. While my colleagues and I embrace the urgent need to make targeted changes to our laws needed to reduce violent crime in the district, we also understand the need to revisit these decisions before considering them in permanent legislation. So I just want to clarify, this is limited.
Well,
but that's not to say they're not going to keep it.
Right. So the way these usually happen is it's not permanent, and then they just slide through on a rider or something else that you don't notice to extend this or
So it's not like if you put it in as an emergency bill that you're just going to remove it.
Right.
You put it in with the intention of keeping it in or keeping it in some fashion. So the question is, what parts are you going to keep? Or what are you going to take out? So he doesn't say all of that, though. But anyway, he continues, I will continue to engage neighbors to ensure we strike the right balance. The bigger picture. Some have pointed out that the emergency legislation adopted today does not address the vital and urgent work pertaining to underlying and systemic issues that exacerbate public safety.
And that would be right. Yes.
I am mindful that even robust administration of our criminal laws has its limits. If we are truly going to build the healthy, safe communities we all crave, we need to think more critically about the chain of events that leads to an individual picking up a gun and engaging in a violent act in the first place. So you're right, Zach. You're absolutely right. So why not take the time to do that? So why I support this bill today, I do not consider it the beginning or the end of this body's work to advance public safety. Neighbors are tired of the violence, and so am I. I look forward to robust oversight of the agencies responsible to enforcing our laws. You're right. I look forward to continued conversations about refocusing MPD police on its core crime-fighting responsibilities while embracing civilian public safety rules where they make sense. And I look forward to the hard, important work of interrupting the cycles of exclusion, underinvestment, and disillusionment that plagues district communities where violence is particularly prevalent. Yeah, so it just sounds like a lot of platitudes there to kind of justify. I'm not sure. No, I didn't put it here, but he did continue in this email saying that he has bills that kind of address some of the systematic issues.
Yeah.
But they've just been introduced. Nothing has moved in terms of any of those. So yeah, so like I said, I just feel like for him, this is just basically to backtrack and justify why he voted this way. But as I said, if you make it a law, it's going to be extremely difficult to remove it or at least take out the things that initially that you're going to have in there. If anything, you're going to add more to it, you know? So, but anyway, so there were a lot of people, and this was kind of the weird thing on Twitter. There was a lot of people who were very happy about this bill, which actually, just as an aside, was very strange on Twitter. I said I wasn't on Twitter today, but I kind of was, because I just saw what looked like to be bots around this issue in DC, just basically being like, just hyper focused on, that was basically all of their threads were, just this issue and crime in general, which I thought very strange.
Yeah, like,
but
who the fuck's gonna, like,
who?
Who?
Right, but it was just the idea of like, who is setting up these bot farms to really push the idea that people are happy for this?
The police union.
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna start going down our rabbit holes, you know?
Right. But that being said, there were some critiques, regarding this bill. If you can zoom in, for me. So this is written by Joshua A. Miller, who wrote, "It's super uncomfortable that in an era where most cities are questioning cash bail and trying to reduce pretrial detention, DC is looking to increase the number of people we incarcerate pretrial. And it's going to be expensive."
Oh, of course it is.
Right. So more pretrial incarceration will further harm our communities without making our communities safer.
Yep.
So he continues, "Pretrial detention is prior to conviction. The fact that we can't convict even half the folks we arrest for illegal guns suggests that we shouldn't automatically be locking them up while it gets resolved. They're not likely to be convicted. It doesn't make us safer. Less than 2% of those released pretrial are arrested for another violent crime. Police shouldn't get a rebuttal presumption that for something that happens 2% of the time, especially when they lack evidence to convict 60% of the time."
Yeah, unless your skin color is different. But yeah.
Of course, prosecutors already detain folks pretrial. They just have to show it's necessary for public safety. And for adults, that's usually not so hard if there's probable cause they committed a violent crime with a firearm.
Mm-hmm.
The new bill would allow prosecutors to detain someone pretrial for crimes like pickpocketing. It's really broad because of how the DC Code defines crimes of violence. This was something
I didn't even think about. This isn't the judge. This is the prosecutors get to decide.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Like. Yeah, that's even worse.
Right. This was something we were trying to fix in the revised criminal code. So it just shows that. Actually, did I put? Yeah, actually, everyone knows the politician's fallacy, right? Something must be done. This is something we can do. Therefore, we must do this. Most of this bill is unresponsive to real crime prevention and crime-solving needs, but it counts as doing something.
Yep. Well, I mean, think about protesters. They deem those to be violent, whatever. Like, what did the Cop City kids get charged with? Like, terrorism, right? Something dumb like that. Yeah.
Right.
This would be the same thing. In DC, where what happens frequently? Like, you know. Okay.
So, I'm gonna play this vid. Real quick. Forgot her name. I think she doesn't say her name here, but she also has some words regarding this.
Frankie Centric on TikTok.
Okay, yeah.
Apparently. This little video here you want?
Yeah.
We cannot incarcerate our way out of wealth disparity and economic crisis. Today, DC Council passed legislation in an attempt to address the public safety issues that we're having in our city. We can all agree that we want the violence in DC to stop. Something has to be done. But what is not the answer is contributing to mass incarceration. This bill expands access to private security cameras. What is not the answer is increasing police power and surveillance, and will eventually lead to more pretrial detention. Being held pretrial means that you have not been convicted of a crime. What is not the answer is using these same methods that have been used for decades and expecting different results. Pretrial detention is a violent practice. It rips people away from their family, away from their livelihood, dehumanizes people and puts them in cages, and exposes them to the trauma of jail itself. We here at Court Watch DC believe that the weaponization of crime itself is a social harm.
Yep. Social harm.
Yeah. I have one more tweet, and this tweet, shout out to Allison Horn, I think basically sums up everything that I would have wanted to say otherwise regarding this. But she tweeted, if there were an easy way to legislate our way to public safety, we would have done it ages ago. If incarceration made us safe, DC would be just about the safest place in the world. Cutting corners and chasing silver bullets is a shameful approach. We deserve so much better.
Yep.
We know what causes crime: poverty, inequality, gaps in resources and opportunities, hopelessness. If you're doubling down on the same flawed and ineffective policies that brought us mass incarceration and a generation of fatherless teens, you're harming more than you're helping. If you're willing to spend hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars to incarcerate a child, but unwilling to pay the children in the Marion Valley Summer Youth Employment Program more than $6.25 an hour, you aren't serious about creating and sustaining public safety in DC. Now, this is another aside, because people were like, oh, teens, there's this program that they can apply and get a job over the summer so they won't get in trouble. Reef, I checked to see how much they get paid.
Yeah.
Do you want to know how much they get paid?
$4.50.
Double that.
$8.50. $9.
$9 an hour.
Yeah.
Now, so a 16-year-old goes in this program. Now, because you're 16, you can't work 40 hours. You can work at maximum is 20.
Yeah.
So you're going to make $9 an hour, 20 hours a week for about 6 weeks.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Not doing the math right now, but that's under $1,000 for the summer. And I'm sorry, and just to give you guys context of this, when I was a senior in high school, I worked at the Gap over 2 decades ago. I made minimum wage. At that time in New Jersey, it was $5.45 an hour. Now, because at that time I was 18, I was able to work a 40-hour week. I didn't because I was in school, but I could work as many shifts as they were able to give me. But I was working for $5 an hour. That was over 2 decades ago. Why in the hell are we giving teenagers not much more than the federal minimum wage when the minimum wage in DC is $16 an hour? If they can do the job, why cannot pay them the full 16? No offense, but that is going to give more. And I'm not making fun of this, but I know many teens who know that they're able to make more on the street.
Straight up.
Sorry.
Not even a problem.
Or have to try and find a job at a normal place outside the program, and good luck trying to get one. Especially now that people don't work at malls in the same way anymore. Like, that's what we used to do, like, growing up. Like, your first job was at a mall. No one shops at malls anymore. Now everything is online.
Check out the Dead Mall series on YouTube. Very good.
Right. So it's like, but you expect to pay teens and just make the justification, oh, they're getting out of trouble with $9 an hour.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So just as an aside, but that's what Allison is saying. It's like, you will spend more money locking them up, but you're not going to invest in actually paying these kids an actual minimum wage so that they would be more likely to do something more productive with themselves. Right?
Yep.
Anyway, if you're willing to spend $88K taxpayer dollars a year detaining each presumptively innocent person held pretrial at DCDOC, but unwilling to inadequately fund pathways, project empowerment, MORCA, and reentry housing, you aren't serious about creating and sustaining public safety in DC.
Yep.
If you were posting Black Lives Matter and offering condolences to Karan Hilton Brown's family, remember we did a segment on him back over the winter. But you support legislation rolling back the modest police accountability measures that may have saved his life, you clearly care more about politics than safety or Black lives. We can't let the politics or fear overpower evidence about what works. Pinto's bill is political theater, and it won't make us any safer. So I'm definitely going to watch this because this will probably affect my activism in the education field in some way, shape, or form. And I already talked about this with Scott already. And honestly, I just think it's a huge distraction to kind of talk about safety in light of other issues that are important to teachers. Not to say that it isn't important, but there's going to be a lot of sectionality between of like safety in terms of like schools and what that means as far as ensuring that our youth are being safe in our schools and all that kind of stuff, which relates to a lot of this stuff, especially like if you were in the low income wards. And again, the people who are pushing this, and this is something that I mentioned on Twitter to someone on Twitter who was being like, oh, this is such a good thing. How do we know this is going to be equitable in terms of who's going to be in pretrial detention? If you're living in the richer wards, you don't have to necessarily worry about that. Or more than likely,
any incarceration to me doesn't help
or
a
giving
damn
those
thing.
families, they might do some wiggle room in order for their children or whoever is involved to get out of it.
Well,
this is a blatant attack.
I also love how they throw in just more security cameras. They just throw that one in. Like, okay. And that's to help them catch more crime, to therefore incarcerate more people that don't really need to be there, regardless of what they've done. You know?
Right.
Like, they probably just need help or, again, housing, food, any of those things.
Right. As I said, this is a straight up backlash to the defund the police movement. And
we'll
so,
see.
as I said, and I didn't realize the full implications of this until I really studied this, but this is dangerous because if this is, and keep in mind, these are Democrats. These are Democrats that are actually doing this shit.
Isn't it always?
And they move to the right as far as crime.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you?
Democracy simply doesn't work.
I mean, like, what it tells me.
Like, I say this in federal politics, and I will say, and I've
said it before, and I'll say it again.
What? Sorry.
Look, I've said a lot about local politics that, you have more effect, better effect in local politics, and that's where you should focus your energy. But I say that with the caveat of saying, even local politicians are not your friends, right? Just because you might have better access to them and you know them, and like, as I said, I know a couple of them personally, and they all voted for this bill.
You got no friends in Washington, D.C.
So it's the idea of just simply trust no politician, especially given the corruption that exists, even on the local level. Now, DC is a different beast, but the implications are still the same. It's the idea of politicians can be bought and sold and do whatever the corporation or whoever donors that are tied to them, they will do whatever they can, do whatever they need to ensure their jobs and in order to keep those donors happy. But ultimately, this affects our communities of color. And I'm sorry, Zach, but like, as one that knows you, and I practically lived right down the hall from you, the fact that you are more in tune of what is happening in your community and you still choose to vote for this anyway, and then kind of backtrack and kind of say, you know, I did
it's
this
only
for the benefit of
temporary.
you.
Right.
This
and
is only a temporary measure, but you can't get rid of it. Will be very hard to get rid of this in any way, shape, or form. Like once you made it, you know, like it's it. So it's going to be a lot harder now to kind of take it out.
Yep.
So, but yeah, as I said, this is, I think, and I wish that on it. And again, this is a local story, but really, we all should be talking about this on independent media because this is happening in DC. That's not to say that that can't happen in New York, in Baltimore, in Chicago, in LA, any of these democratic cities where crime is rising. They can essentially do the same thing.
Yep.
You know, so I think it's just something. So consider this, like, for our family here, a cautionary tale of don't expect even your local politicians to work in your favor. You just really need to make sure that you're really on them and ensure that you also are aware of corporate interests, even on the local level, that can affect how people vote, that ultimately affect how people live. And so just be mindful of that, you know, as you do your activism, you know, either whether, you know, here or on Twitter, you know, like, or in your town or whatever. Just be mindful of this, that politicians, more often than not, do not work in your favor. So it's really up to you to make sure that you put your foot on their neck to ensure that they're really working in your favor.
Yep. Well,
you're done. You're done.
Oh god,
I am.
But yeah, that surveillance shit in there is also just funny. Speaking of, more surveillance, and censorship, by our favorite friends, the FBI. You know, so that's always nice.
FBI, open up!
We got, I have some bit from the Gray Zone. No, Glenn Greenwald, on this as well. So that should be fun. But essentially, the FBI, colluded with Ukraine to censor lawful social media speech. A House report says so. I actually got this from Eyewitness News in Albany. This is Jackson Walker over at their national desk. But we'll start with Glenn first, who kind of lays out the beginning of this. So let me go here and here and here. You can find this on Rumble, as you can find us on Rumble. You know, we're over there if you want to check us out.
Just to show you how nefarious this is, there's breaking news from today. It's a House Judiciary report. They are investigating the weaponization of the FBI, which is what that Congress is supposed to do. It's the first real investigation into the U.S. security state since the Church Committee in the mid-1970s that uncovered all kinds of abuses of the FBI infiltrating political groups, monitoring political dissidents and the like on both the left and the right. And here's a new report. There you see the title on the screen. Just out today, the FBI's collaboration with a compromised Ukrainian intelligence agency to censor American speech. Here's what the report says, quote, on February 15, 2023, as part of its investigation into the federal government's role in censoring lawful speech on social media platforms. Let's say that again. What this investigation is, it's an investigation into the federal government's role in censoring lawful speech on social media platforms. The Committee on the Judiciary issued a subpoena to Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, and Alphabet, the parent company of Google and YouTube. Documents obtained in response to those subpoenas revealed that the FBI on behalf of a compromised Ukrainian intelligence entity, requested and in some cases directed the world's largest social media platforms to censor Americans engaging in constitutionally protected speech online. The committee's investigation has revealed that the FBI, the federal law enforcement agency responsible for disrupting foreign malign influence, facilitated censorship requests to American social media companies on behalf of a Ukrainian intelligence agency infiltrated by Russian-aligned actors. Regardless of its intended purpose in endorsing the SBU's request, the FBI had no legal justification for facilitating the censorship of Americans' protected speech on social media. The FBI and SBU, the Ukrainian agency, sent Meta massive spreadsheets containing thousands of accounts to remove, including authentic American accounts.
Well, what do you think so far, Care Bear?
I mean, we've already seen that happening. Like, shout out to Feeney. Like, I remember she got knocked off of Twitter for what she say?
Something about, unaliving someone, pretty much.
And that insignificant that she got kicked off Twitter for that. So if she got kicked off for saying something politically standing, you can imagine like how much more they're gonna. I mean, we've already beginning to see that, especially with our channel, how our channel is heavily suppressed. But I mean, this just kind of gives more confirmation to things that we've been, I think, especially extremely aware
I still love how they throw in that this thing was infiltrated by
Russian scum.
Russian scum got in here too, so it's their fault. It's still the Russians' fault,
Right.
like. Even though we were colluding with the SBU, which was a Ukrainian organization, to censor you, an American. So let's get into it. The FBI in February colluded with the Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, to censor lawful speech of American citizens on U.S. social media platforms, according to a House Republican report. The 27-page document released Tuesday by the U.S. House of Reps details known attempts by the FBI to censor and remove thousands of American social media accounts through 2023 with the goal of counteracting supposed Russian social media disinformation. Accounts targeted for removal, some of which belong to American journalists, were first identified by the Russian-infiltrated SBU before being presented to the FBI. The FBI then made requests to Meta, Google, and other social media companies that the accounts in question be removed from their sites, according to internal FBI emails included in the report. Collin, do you remember me bringing a video of Joe Rogan talking to Mark Zuckerberg, talking about the Hunter Biden laptop stuff, being FBI saying, no, don't cover that, right?
Yes.
So now they're just doing that for Ukrainians. So Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Google all received account removal requests. One such account targeted by the SBU was at USA Peruski, the official verified Russian language Instagram account of the U.S. State Department. Okay? It's our stuff. Literally our stuff. Neither the FBI nor the SBU provided an explanation as to why the account was targeted. Okay? The new information highlights the FBI's unconstitutional role in enabling the SBU's censorship regime and raises grave concern about the FBI's credibility, reliability, and competence as the nation's premier law enforcement organization. A press release for the report on the House website reads, "The House found that the FBI concealed the fact that the targeted accounts belong to Americans, therefore violating the First Amendment." Okay, so I have links to this article in the description below, as always. So they do have the links to the actual full report there. If you literally want, it's 26 pages, the actual report. So it's actually not bad to kind of skim through. But here's Glenn taking on some of that for us. So we'll see what he says.
That's what the Twitter files was. That's why corporate media instructed everyone to ignore the Twitter files, called it a nothing burger. Because this is the dirty secret of establishment power, that the internet is being increasingly controlled and censored. If you go back and read the literature in the mid-1990s about the reason people were excited about the internet and its advent, they viewed it as a liberatory technology, as something that would emancipate individuals from the need to rely on centralized corporate and state control to communicate, to organize. It would allow individuals freedom to disseminate views without having to rely on corporations or state power to do so. It had the potential to be the most empowering technological innovation in history. That's what its proponents were heralding it as being. And instead, it has been degraded into its exact opposite. By allowing the US government to turn it into a tool of mass surveillance, it became the greatest tool of coercion and monitoring in human history. And now it is one of the most closed information systems and one of the most potent propaganda systems in the world, under the control of the US security state and the US government, exercising that power through big tech, that has the ability to ban all dissent and all dissidents, to make them disappear. And that's what happens. And the more that happens, the more a prison gets created in the mind. That's how real despotism works. There's a prelude, an introduction to 1984 that George Orwell wrote that ended up being banned. I believe it was to 1984. It might have been to his essay about Catalonia. We'll check on that. But the essay didn't get published because the point that Orwell made was too threatening to the West right after World War II. What he was essentially saying was, we're taught that despotism means this blunt use of force. That if you criticize the government, death squads in black costumes show up at your house, point guns at your head, haul you off to a gulag, put you in prison. That is a form of despotism. But the much more effective form of control is to so propagandize the public that dissent disappears in people's minds. The prison exists in people's minds. So that you don't need to punish dissent because there is no dissent, or there's so little dissent that it's easily marginalized. And you've just turned the population into such conformists that they believe everything the government says. That is a much more effective form of despotism. It doesn't create backlash. It creates the illusion of freedom. And that's what the internet is designed to do, to create the illusion that you have freedom and you have choice, when in reality, everybody knows that there's a tiny little range of freedom in which they can function, and everything that falls outside the line, no matter who you are. Even if you're a heir to one of America's most storied and powerful and beloved political families like RFK Jr., if you step outside that line, set by the US government in collaboration with big tech, you will be silenced and censored and disappeared.
Thoughts? Yep.
Well, I mean, again, going back to my last story in the previous segment, when we cut it out, you know, it just, this was just kind of fascinating to see. Just as I said, I saw a lot of Twitter profiles that were hyper focused on this crime bill and just crime in DC, and that's all that they were talking
for safety.
about. It's like, or yeah, in the guise
safety
of
is number one priority.
Yeah,
Number
so
one
it's just
priority.
the idea, and I think, and I don't think we talk about this enough on the left, but the idea, like, and I just have to wonder, like, these bot farms that, you know, who's to say that they're not government, you know, controlled, to kind of monitor what people are saying, how how people might be interacting, you know, with them, and ultimately who they can determine to kind of kick off or just kind of keep, you know, a side eye on, you know, just as far as, you know, what they tweet or their overall content on social media. Like, I was heavily suppressed on, I think it was last year, if not a year and a half ago. Like, I was heavily, like, I wasn't getting, I think at that point I hit like 2,000 followers, and then there was a certain number that I just kind of stayed at.
Partially involved in this story, partially due to our relationship with Tara, who is on Ukrainian kill lists, you know, as are many of the people we talk to and follow. So, you know, we're probably directly censored by this organization through the SBU, I imagine.
Right, but I'm talking about, this was before we even started INF.
Yes.
That I was like, like I would tweet and a lot of my tweets were not necessarily going out, or I was losing like followers more than I was growing them. It was just very strange. But again, like you guys have seen my content. I don't think it's really anything that salacious or anything that I would argue that, you have to monitor. But if Twitter is able to kind of knock me for that, imagine what with the government's help or like having that involvement of what they can do to anybody, for something in terms of, I don't know, let's say regarding this upcoming election.
Yep.
Or anything regarding Russia, Ukraine. So
here is the press release. Why did I really? No, here. So today, the House Judiciary Committee and the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government released a report titled "The FBI's Collaboration with Compromised Ukrainian Intelligence Agency to Censor American Speech." Based on a subset of subpoenaed documents, the report details how the Federal Bureau of Investigation colluded with the Security Service of Ukraine, an agency widely known to be infiltrated by Russian-aligned forces. By routinely sending social media platform spreadsheets and other documents containing thousands of accounts to take down. In doing so, the FBI and SBU flagged authentic American accounts for removal, including a verified U.S. State Department account and those belonging to American journalists. The report also exposes how the FBI ordered Facebook and Instagram legal cover to remove the SBU's flagged accounts. The new information highlights the FBI's unconstitutional role in enabling the SBU's censorship regime and raises grave concern about the FBI's credibility, reliability, and competence as the nation's premier law enforcement organization. The coordination between the FBI, SBU, and American social media companies is substantial, and the full extent of the FBI's involvement with the SBU remains the subject of an ongoing investigation. You can read the full report here. And I have those links in the article in the description below. So, what does this sound like to you, Collin? Like, we got, I mean, this is the White House and this Republican committee saying, what about the FBI? And what do you think the solution to that should be? Anyone can take a guess in the chat, at least the way I feel about it, but a little bit more from Glenn. So on what's actually in the...
On March 1st, 2022, week after the Russian invasion, FBI Special Agent Kobnet sent an email to a Meta employee with the subject, quote, additional...
And he's pulling this info from the actual investigation that got put out, those 26 pages, right?
Information accounts. Copying agents Kellett and Chan, Agent Kobnet wrote, quote, I have a few more Instagram and Facebook accounts that, according to the SBU, that's the Ukrainian intelligence agency, spread Russian disinformation. For your review and action is deemed appropriate. According to his email signature, Agent Kobnet was then serving as the, quote, assistant leading attaché for Ukraine and Belarus. Agent Kobnet attached 2 spreadsheets to his email to Meta. One spreadsheet contained a catalog with the timestamp, text, and URL for 15,865 individual items of content on Instagram, including post stories and reels. The other spreadsheet contained a detailed registry of 5,165 Facebook accounts, ostensibly suspected of, quote, spreading Russian disinformation. Meta suggested establishing a, quote, 24/7 channel to respond to the Ukrainian agency's requests. Although the SBU's list contained American accounts, neither the FBI nor Meta appeared to raise concerns about the provenance of the SBU's disinformation registries. Instead, the FBI demonstrated a willingness to support and implement the Ukrainians' calls to take down certain accounts, even though the request included US-based accounts.
So that's the kind of stuff that's happening, full, what is it, 24/7 hotline. Pretty much, they got that red phone right on the table, bro. Here, can you deal with these accounts for us? Right? So here we go. On February 15th, as part of its investigation on the federal, I pulled this directly from the investigation on the federal government's role in censoring lawful speech in social media platforms, the Committee on the Judiciary issued a subpoena to Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, and Alphabet, the parent company of Google and YouTube. Documents obtained in response to those subpoenas revealed that the FBI, on behalf of a compromised Ukrainian intelligence, requested and in some cases directed the world's largest social media platforms to censor Americans engaging in constitutionally protected speech online, which I've not heard of that used frequently. Constitutionally protected online speech. When you heard that in a while, Collin? Usually it's only from, of course, it's the Republicans, right?
Right.
The committee's investigation was revealed that the FBI, responsible for disrupting foreign malign influence, okay, that's supposedly one of their jobs, right, facilitated censorship requests to American social media companies on behalf of a Ukrainian intelligence agency, and they talk about infiltrated by Russian-aligned actors. Yeah, but it wasn't always. You should probably check on that. In so doing, the FBI violated the First Amendment rights of Americans and potentially undermined our national security. What are you going to do about it, Republicans? Anything? Anything at all? Like, you know, in light of well-documented incidents of the, and it cuts off because we don't need the rest of it. So here is the known, this is March of 2022, right? And look, they got their whole calendar filled out of requests, right? On all these dates. Look at all that. Like, dude, this has been happening for a while. You know? Like, so the FBI facilitated censorship requests to American social media companies on behalf of the Ukrainian intelligence agency, violated the First Amendment, right? We just read that. So, to conclude its report, the House resolved to continue its investigation to determine the extent of the FBI's censorship. So we'll let Glenn actually close this out from a real person's perspective and not eyewitness news. So anything you have to say, Collin, before we do that?
No.
Yep. Same old bullshit.
It's just like, it's same old bullshit. Water is wet. The sky is blue. We've been new.
Yeah. We done been there, you know.
Yeah.
So
it just gets more complicated, and that's all.
And I think, again, what we have to understand is that this is a war on dissent. This is a war to cleanse the internet of anyone who questions U.S. orthodoxy and to ensure that the internet is banned from being what it was supposed to be, a source of free information and free expression, into what really is the most potent and most inescapable propaganda weapon ever to be developed. It's aimed right at people's brains. And the idea is to cleanse it of dissent so that the only information to which people are exposed is information that American power centers want them to think and want them to have. And that is why I really do regard as the overarching cause the preservation of the few remaining places on the internet devoted to free speech. Remember, Elon Musk turned into public enemy number one. He was beloved by the global public. He was the person who was going to give us electric cars and save the planet from climate catastrophe and get us to Mars. And someone who has been a success story, and everything he touched overnight, he turned into public enemy number one because he bought Twitter based on the promise to just allow a little bit more free speech, take away that weapon from them. That's how valuable the censorship regime is to them. And now you have the entire US security state creating vast tentacles to ensure that this happens. There are a few remaining places on the internet that genuinely allow free speech. Obviously, Rumble is one of them. RFK Jr. has put his channel on Rumble because that's one of the few places where he can go where he knows he won't be censored. These are like outposts of dissent. And obviously, power centers are waging war on them. The French government, already Rumble is not available in France because France demanded that Rumble remove RT from its platform. The French government just reached over to this American corporation and said, we demand you obey our censorship order and take off this news agency that we dislike and want silence. And when Rumble said no, they were forced to remove themselves from France pending a lawsuit. Those attacks are going to come more and more and more aimed at any platform that is devoted to free speech. And that's the reason these platforms are so worth fighting for, because that is, for now, until we get this kind of decentralized protocol that Jack Dorsey believes is the ultimate solution to decentralize the internet, to put protocols in the hands of every person and not have it be centralized. And until that happens, the only outpost for free speech will be sites like Rumble or any place devoted to protecting free speech. And if those are lost, we will live in a world dominated by the censorship industry. And you don't have to worry if you are a good liberal, which is why good liberals aren't worried. In fact, they're happy about this, because those are never the people targeted with censorship. It's only real dissidents, people who dislike establishment orthodoxies and who are opposed to establishment power, who are threatened by this, who are the targets of it. And that's how you can identify who they are.
Well,
I mean, anyone who knows what's happening on YouTube, well, just social media in general, this shouldn't be a shock to anybody. But I think it's just the idea of even just here having to be careful of what we say.
Yep.
In fear of getting strikes, or worse yet, getting our channel straight up removed, or like fully demonetized, not being able to make revenue of your content, like any form of dissent, as Glenn was saying, is being targeted. And that's not freedom. I mean, that's not the values that, our forefathers, had when it came to like free speech,
For sure.
Now, granted, like certain free speech can be harmful, but
yep.
I think in our case, and especially on the left, it's the idea of we're tired of seeing the status quo because we're affected by it. We're seeing the complacency of how people, just respond to our politicians while the world is burning. And we are kind of screaming, help. We need to do things in another way. And that is an unacceptable message to me.
I'm Michael Jordan. Stop it. Get some help.
So,
yeah.
It's frustrating and kind of worrisome, because I do think about this given, my position, as a teacher, and I do think about this all the time. And we had, shout out to Crab, because I remember having this conversation with him, just having, my full name, Crab. Having my full name, listed on Twitter, and given kind of what I do in the space, I think about that in terms of will this affect me, for future employment if I decide to leave, or, because I have hours of content now, posted on YouTube and on Twitter for the world to see. And some of my takes are spicy, so, and that may not be acceptable in, certain platforms or, things that I do. But it's just the idea of this surveillance, like we talked about this in the story before, just more surveillance in terms of your everyday life, how the police respond to you. And we're kind of seeing this here, like through actions within the FBI of how they could potentially target you if you say something that is counter to what they want you to talk about.
Yep.
It sucks. It really
Sure.
does suck because, especially, in our case, we're trying to have people
It's
open
crazy that
their
it's not-
mind to thinking beyond what we've been force fed.
How much money have we sent to Ukraine now?
Oh, God, I can't even.
Like that, and then you like the FBI is not even like, it's not censorship just for our government at this point. It's now censorship on behalf of some foreign power that we then spend millions and trillion, like the conflicts of interests involved in all of this is incredible, you know? Right. So I hope they figure it out, you know? Like if we could just get rid of some of those folks, that'd be nice. You know, just fucking on out of there. Just yeet them. So speaking of the people we need to yeet, you got this guy and this guy, you know.
So the guy at the bottom there will be significant, but you will know his name once we mention him, because we talked about this guy on this channel before, in relation to another larger channel. We'll get into that, or at least Reef, I know you definitely will have stuff to say about that. But sure. You pulled this up for me yesterday, because as I keep saying, this is related to student loan debt. Like I figured I was done, you know, after, you know, especially the Supreme Court struck it down, and I did a slight victory lap in saying slight, because, you know, like I was saying for months, it's going to be struck down for these reasons, and they were struck down essentially for the reasons that I said.
Yep.
You know, but right now we're hearing from everybody on the Democratic side, oh, it's the Supreme Court's fault. It's the Republicans' fault. You know, no one, and like on this channel, I've called out Biden, and I put my 2 feet down and stand by what I'm saying. I have to put the blame on Biden on this, because as I say, he has the best lawyers and advisors in the world, and they didn't expect that, one, it wouldn't be challenged, or two, that using the HEROES Act to cancel student debt was not probably the best way to go about it. And now they're using the Higher Education Act, and now they're saying it's going to take longer.
Come on, man. Give me a little break here.
But all that to say, we've been hearing that it's the Republicans' fault, it's this person's fault, but there's a person that should be implicated too, that I didn't know this, but it makes sense.
Sure.
And this affects a certain channel and a couple of people, especially in this too. So let's see, catch up. There we go. So this article is from Slate, written by Alexander Salmon, a true Megadonor. So this kind of goes into student loan debt and the implications by a surprising but not surprising person. So
who wrote this? Who wrote this lie?
Yeah, so while I was away, for you guys who are just coming in, well, actually, I think there are a couple new folks that came in. Welcome. Glad you're here. Reef has been playing with the soundboard, obviously, while I was away.
I'm doing well. I'm doing okay. I'm doing good. Like, you know how hard it is to find these? Like, I gotta type stuff in now, people. You know? Like...
But anyway, so Alexander reports, President Joe Biden's student loan debt relief proposal is very popular. Roughly 3 in 5 Americans support it. The Supreme Court is very unpopular. According to one new survey, only 3 in 10 registered voters approve it.
That many? That many?
I think for the right wingers, I'm sure that
it's like that's like, where's that 1 in 10 doctor, bro? Get him in here. You know? Like,
So the court's decision to kill Biden's student loan debt policy and take between 10,000 and 20,000 out of the pockets of needy Americans could mean electoral gains for Democrats. To that end, the liberal nonprofit group Protect Borrowers Action last week announced a $2 million ad campaign targeting House Republicans in battleground districts who signed an amicus brief urging the Supreme Court to strike down Biden's program. Many of those House Republicans also voted to dismantle Biden's plan earlier this year. And again, and water is wet. So we didn't know this. But there was one notable non-Republican group that joined those Republicans in petitioning the court to strike down Biden's proposal. Protect Democracy, a nonpartisan legal group co-founded by Ian Basting, Justin Florence, and Emily Loeb, all alums of the Obama administration.
Obama.
Yeah, where is that? Come on.
Obama.
Thank you.
Yep. I got it. I just have to go to my orange section. You know. So,
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
Protect for Democracy, which claims to prevent our democracy from declining into a more authoritarian form of government, filed an amicus curiae brief to the court to bolster the extremely rickety case that the court used to justify its decision.
Whoa.
Oh, you can zoom out.
There you go. Sorry.
It is important to recognize that both student debt and the pandemic have disproportionately harmed lower income and minority communities, the brief read. But the answer to these problems is not the unchecked aggrandizement of executive power. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The message essentially was that the organization didn't like that Biden was trying to pass student debt relief through executive action. These are
Obama.
Democrats.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah,
Not Republicans.
Mhm.
Democrats.
Yep.
Or at least dinos.
The dinos. Dinos and rhinos. What is this? A special Transformers episode? What are we doing?
It's not an uncommon argument, though it's strange coming from Obama alums. It's stranger still given that Protect Democracy has one really notable funder, Democratic megadonor and top Biden backer, Reef Hoffman. Now, Reef.
Reid?
Please.
Yes.
Reid. Not Reid. Yeah, Reid. But please, Reef, can you please explain to our fam, especially for those who are new, who may not have watched I&M within the last year
Our
and a
multiple
half.
coverages of this weirdo.
Who is Reid Hoffman?
AFT. I hope. Or I'm dumb. You know. I am sometimes dumb.
Well, why have we talked about him? Who is he connected to?
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, he's an internet guy, right? So venture capitalist, standard. He's done OpenAI, LinkedIn.
There's a certain channel that he funds.
Oh, I remember. It's
There you go. There you go.
I remember. It's Crystal
He's
Ball.
one of Breaking Point's funders.
Can you stop embarrassing yourself?
Oh, great. Now you're just going to play along, Crystal.
No, I'm not. Only a couple.
Yeah.
You know.
We can do this circle jerk forever.
So. I know, I'm the worst.
Here.
It's okay. We can grow up. You know.
But we have fun here. We have fun.
We can get serious.
But anyway.
We'll be fine.
Anyway, during the Biden years, Hoffman has positioned himself as the centrist fundraiser of the centrist president's tenure. A co-founder of LinkedIn, Hoffman poured $8.6 million into the 2022 midterms, making him one of the very top individual Democratic donors of the election cycle. He also positioned himself as a close ally and booster of Biden. In 2021, Hoffman hosted a virtual fundraiser for the Democratic National Committee, where tickets went up to $875 $875,000.
What? Huh? How much again? Like
$875,000.
You greedy dirtbag!
what the fuck? Like
Give me your fucking
Biden later thanked Hoffman personally for his generous support during the event, according to a transcript of the president's remarks. Of course he would.
Oh God.
And he ran a bunch of bad boys.
In 2020, Hoffman was an active bundler for Biden's presidential campaign, raising money on his behalf while also putting millions of dollars into super PACs backing Biden's candidacy for the White House. According to Fortune, Hoffman sent $7 million on pro-Biden super PACs and ads opposing Trump. Hoffman even founded Mainstream Democrats PAC, a super PAC to elevate moderate Democrats like, you guessed it, Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Already, Hoffman has announced that he will host fundraising events for the president's bid next year. They know they can rely on us, a Hoffman advisor said of the White House to CNBC. There's something of a pattern here. One might phrase that statement with irony. Throughout the Biden presidency, the famously moderate president has had his ambitions thwarted over and over by none other than his fellow centrists.
Come
on, man. I disagree with that. I argue that Biden can only be thwarted if he allows it.
Yeah.
But I digress. From the original Build Back Better Act, which a small group of House moderates worked to sabotage, to the minimum wage hike in the American Rescue Plan Act, which was knocked out by centrists in the Senate, Biden has found some of his greatest opposition from his very own. Both of those failed proposals were, at various times, considered Biden's potential signature accomplishment, much as student loan debt cancellation later assumed that mantle. And it's not the first time that Hoffman's funding has worked counter to Biden's legislative vision. Oh, God. In 2022, much of Hoffman's spending via mainstream Democrats PAC went towards opposing progressive Democrats in primaries. That money ended up going to conservative House Democrats who had opposed and undermined Biden on signature issues. The group successfully went in huge for Texas Democrat Henry
Cuellar. Hope.
I'm not sure that's how you pronounce it, but
whatever.
Who opposed Biden's gun control legislation and continues to oppose him on guns. No, it's Cuellar. There we go. Cuellar also proposed and continues to oppose the president on the all-important issue of abortion rights.
Which
remember that how Nancy Pelosi and Jim Clyburn went to canvass for this bitch?
But I also know that the abortion right, these are like all of these issues. It's like the same bullshit. Like we know they could have fixed it already.
Right. Well, it should have been fixed, honestly. But,
right. By them.
Hoffman's super. Yes.
Right.
Biden's super PAC. Hoffman's super PAC spending helped Cuellar eke out a narrow victory in a bitter primary race. A similar dynamic played out in Oregon's 5th District, where the mainstream Democrats PAC spent on behalf of conservative Democrats Kurt Schrader, who went to great lengths to undermine Biden's Build Back Better bill and worked to sabotage Biden's popular drug pricing reform in particular. Schrader lost in the primary. His opponent, what's that?
Cuellar, apparently. Like double L-Y.
Cuellar?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's like
that, yeah.
Spanish, you know?
Yeah. Schrader lost in the primary. His opponent, Jeremy McLeod Skinner, lost in the general after Schrader refused to endorse his fellow Democrat. In fact, a major percentage of Hoffman's political spending in 2022 was only in the primaries. By late April, his top advisor, Dimitri Malhorn, told the New York Times that putting money towards House Democrats was a lost cause, that midterm wipeout was baked in, and that the best thing to do was try to lock down elections in the future. Biden, by then left for dead by many of the party's usual megadonors, made a handful of decisions that helped win a historic Democratic overperformance in November. He embraced abortion rights after Roe v. Wade was overturned in a much more fulsome way than ever before. He passed a major party line spending bill in the Inflation Reduction Act. And critically, he announced that he would be canceling student loan debt by executive order.
Now that is a lie.
Yep. To be sure, the Supreme Court needed little encouragement to strike down Biden's signature student loan debt proposal. But Chief Justice John Roberts did go out his way to cite Democrats in his decision to strike down the policy. Nancy Pelosi is mentioned by name in a footnote to the majority opinion. She previously said that Biden did not have the authority to cancel student debt. We know this. It's not Hoffman's or to protect democracy's fault, that the court killed student debt relief, but for a self-appointed Biden booster and believer in the Biden theory of politics, Hoffman sure isn't helping this guy.
No.
Some qualitative polling has shown that Biden is in dire need of, scroll down, please.
Yeah, there you go.
In dire need of something from the past 4 years of his presidency to point to that has immediately improved the lives of voters. It's possible still that Biden's plan B of debt cancellation will succeed. No, it won't. But none of these Hoffman-funded groups nor Hoffman himself have made major public commitments to helping the president's new signature policies succeed. For now, all they managed to do is help deprive Biden of something he can actually run on.
Yep.
And so you brought this for me. This is from the Debt Collective. But they said, slowly but surely, as student debt payments resume, millions of people will ask, why isn't there another pause extension? And then they'll find out Biden negotiated away the payment pause months ago in a debt ceiling deal, even before SCOTUS ruling. And moral of the story, get money out of politics.
Yep.
Especially Reid Hoffman, get his ass out. Yeah, but just this writer in this article basically makes Biden a sympathetic figure in terms of, oh, it wasn't his fault. You know, it was Reid Hoffman who called, but no, like Biden's only in control of what he allows it to happen. And he's pretty much said in the past that he basically will become, or what would become, basically a hoe. His words for the establishment. And basically that's why he's like, you know.
That's the only way you can find room to pay for it.
Right. So it's not like.
Yeah, he's gonna. I would prostitute myself, essentially. Like they wouldn't. He was mad that they wouldn't let him prostitute himself. That's what he was upset about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And now, he's essentially like, it doesn't take much. Well, it takes quite a bit in our standards, but for him, not much. But again, I would argue like that probably, like the idea of Biden canceling student debt, I argue that he never wanted to cancel student debt anyway. So it was just the idea that he was getting money essentially to tank it, you know, which is just a bonus for him and the party. Yeah. You know, because now, as we say, they can fundraise us for the money in light of
we gotta fix it. We gotta fix the problem that we could have fixed.
We need more people in the Senate. We need more people in the Senate so that we're able to actually do something.
The polls.
So
vote harder.
You know, like doing the right thing doesn't, you know, like doesn't mean anything to these people. It's the idea of how much they can get, you know, so that they're willing to tank these bills. So I didn't like this sympathetic take. I'm wondering if it was sarcastic.
No, I think it's from Slate. No, that's how they think.
It is?
Yes. Oh yeah, that's them. That's like shit. That's like shit Libby defending of like it's not really, it's these. So what it is it's like rotating villain syndrome.
Yeah. So it's like these other. It's basically in line of, oh, it's the parliamentarian. Oh, it's Joe Manchin.
Yes.
Oh, it's Kirsten Sinema.
Yep.
Oh, it's all these people that are preventing Biden from actually It's to actually do the things that he wanted to do. It can't. Biden is not the president that he doesn't have any control or actually put his foot down to actually make these people accountable and bend to, and use the bully pulpit to bend to his will if they sabotage any of his plans.
Yes, this is
Biden doesn't have any of that control.
This is it wasn't me, pretty much.
Right.
That's what this is. It's but it's also like, I mean, look, they've done this to Nancy Pelosi with her like stock buyback, like all that crap. Her, you know, they allow these terrible Democrats to exist. It's like what the Squad does. The Squad blames it on these worst Democrats and then does nothing to get rid of those worst Democrats. Like,
Right. It's like how AOC, when she, well, this wasn't new, but I think it was new to a lot of people that she was endorsing Biden and basically making the comment like, oh, it's the Senate that prevented any changes, not the House, where Mama Bear was, that prevented a lot of these issues, especially regarding student debt, that a justice actually quoted her, basically saying, you know, that student loan debt cannot be forgiven. You're not going to call her out, but you're
it'll
going to call
never
out.
come to pass.
So,
yeah.
But
they've always
long
had the
story
power,
short,
Colin. That's
you know,
the problem.
So, so anyone who watches this clip, tag Crystal and Kyle to this and be like, so you know that one of your major donors, at least for breaking points, is responsible for essentially tanking student loan debt. What says you? So
Yeah.
do that for me in the comment. Do that for me on Twitter once we clip this out. Thank you.
Grow up and get serious.
But anyway, Colin, with our country going to shit, empire death and all that, what do you think the other countries might do? They might choose another group to hang out with. They're tired of our table. They're gonna go play with another. Does anyone get that reference in chat? Nope, no, just me. You know.
Yeah.
We got new countries. You're the BRICS. They're joining the battle. They're coming in. They're getting here.
I thought, you know what? I said that, you know, for this clip, this sound like that might be a one-time thing. I think basically whenever we mention BRICS, we should just play.
Yeah, I'm down. So, anyone know what these flags are in chat? You got to get all three though. You got to get all three.
Yeah, let us know in the chat if you know without checking online.
Cheating, right?
Cheating. Which countries these?
And we'll know. Colin's a teacher. He's got eyes in the back of his head. He knows. You know.
Actually,
but anyway,
if you were to ask,
it's already.
I would not.
It's already here, but the chat's 7 seconds and behind, so they already had their time. So, new development: bank de-dollarizing, adding Argentina, Saudi Arabia, and Zimbabwe as members. This is from the Orinoco Tribune. This is Ben Norton. You know, he's not great on every take, but he's good on a lot of this BRICS stuff, so I'll take him on that. But he writes, the BRICS block new development bank, an alternative to the U.S.-dominated World Bank, is de-dollarizing its loans, promoting local currencies, and adding new members, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, and Zimbabwe. So, the BRICS bloc of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa is expanding and building a new economic architecture to challenge the dominance of the U.S. dollar. One of the most important institutions created by BRICS is the New Development Bank. This is a global South-oriented alternative to the World Bank, which is locally in and essentially controlled by the United States. So in March 2023, the NDB inaugurated its new chief, Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil from the South American nation's leftist Workers' Party. Rousseff has stressed that the NDB's goals are financing infrastructure investments and helping our members combat poverty, create jobs, and promote environmentally sustainable development. She also welcomed several more countries to join the bank. Current NDB members include the 5 BRICS nations, as well as Bangladesh, the UAE, and Egypt. Uruguay is already in the process of joining. So it feels like the Avengers are assembling. So look at all those flags. Brazil, Russia, India, China. This is Zimbabwe, right?
No, that's South Africa.
South Africa.
Yeah.
And then
no,
I don't know either. I don't know this one or this one. Someone can tell me in the chat.
The last one's Egypt.
Egypt,
I believe.
Okay, with the little bird boy. So Rousseff said NDB leadership approved these countries' membership's request, and the decision will officially be announced in August at the Summit of BRICS Head of State, which is tentatively planned to meet in South Africa. The new NDB president disclosed this news while Argentina's economic minister, Sergio Massa, was visiting the bank's headquarters in Shanghai, China. So this is, almost all of the world powers outside of ours, and NATO countries. So, but yeah, they're literally going to China, then Shanghai, then South Africa. We're jet setting on this. So we get to Brazil's president, Lula da Silva, who helped found the BRICS during his first 2 terms in the 2000s, returned to office in January 2023. Lula has played a key role in advocating for Argentina to join BRICS. In a summit of South American leaders in Brazil in May, Lula also endorsed Venezuela joining the bloc. Right? So he's trying to get all these characters retconned into this Smash Bros. Game, He's like, we got to have Luigi, we got to have Mario, like he's doing it up. So on May 31st, we concluded the 8th NDB annual meeting in Shanghai on the theme, Shaping a New Era of Global Development. We thank the Board of Governors for their guidance and insights toward building an inclusive, resilient, and sustainable future for EMDCs. So, there they all are, sitting pretty, So on May 30 and 31st, the New Development Bank held its annual meeting, the institution's 8th since it began operation in 2015. NDB President Rousseff used the special occasion to reiterate that the bank's objective is eventual de-dollarization. Collin. That's not good.
Not the U.S.
No. The short-term goal is to offer 30% of NDB loans in local currencies. This would be an increase from its present rate of 22%. In April, Rousseff announced that the NDB plans to transition away from the U.S. dollar, pledging that nearly 1/3 of its loan book will be financed in the currencies of member countries by 2026. So, new chief of the BRICS New Development Bank, Brazil's leftist ex-president Dilma Rousseff, revealed that they are gradually moving away from the U.S. dollar, promising at least 30% of loans in local currency of members. So, what does that mean, you think, Care Bear? Anything?
At least
I'm interested in the 30% of loans thing. That's interesting.
I'm not sure what. If
Me
anyone
either.
in the chat has
Somebody with number knowledge would go explain. But we'll have this lady do some of the talking for us. So.
At the same time, it is necessary to find ways to avoid foreign exchange risk and other issues, such as being dependent on a single currency, such as the US dollar. The good news is that we are seeing many countries choosing to trade using their own currencies. China and Brazil, for instance, are agreeing to exchange with RMB and the Brazilian real. At the NDB, we have committed to it in our strategy. For the period from 2022 to 2026, NDB has to lend 30% in local currency, and so 30% of our loan book will be financed in the currencies of our member countries. That will be extremely important to help our countries avoid exchange rate risks and shortage in finance that hinder long-term investments.
Okay.
So does that explain?
It sounds like it's basically, it sounds like it's a way to kind of prevent what potentially happens in Africa a lot. Well, not a lot, but it has happened, that they default.
Right.
When they essentially run out of money.
Yep.
So,
so by diversifying its use of currencies, the NDP not only seeks to weaken the bloc's dependence on the dollar, but also hopes to help developing countries avoid painful fluctuations in exchange rates. The US dollar is the global reserve currency, so Washington's domestic monetary policy has an impact on the world economy, a phenomenon known as the Triffin dilemma. Right? You ever heard of that, Collin? The Triffin dilemma?
No.
Okay. No. So it's partially the petrodollar stuff, right? Since March 2022, the U.S. Central Bank, the Fed, has aggressively raised interest rates. This has put downward pressure on the currencies of many global South nations, right? This is what you were talking about them defaulting and stuff, right? Making it more expensive to import foreign products and pay off dollar-denominated debt, while also fueling capital flight. So money leaves, doesn't stay, and they're taking all of it anyway. So we need to create a diversified global currency system. Got to diversify your bonds, Collin. You got to diversify them. Rousseff said at the NDB annual meeting, in the future, it is unlikely that one single currency can dominate the world's currency system. Okay, keep that in mind, peoples. We will see more local currency used to settle trade, the NDB president added. So that's what they're going with. That the more of you have, the more options you have, right?
Right.
So here they go.
Then it's going to be cheaper. Like,
yes,
essentially.
Theoretically, it all levels out to common denominators. Right. In NDB's annual meeting opening ceremony, NDB President Dilma Rousseff highlighted the bank's commitment to eradicating poverty and hunger and supporting members' countries' contributions on climate change per the Paris Agreement. So that I'm not as depending on what climate change actions they're talking about, that can be a bit worrying. But
that's the only thing that worries me. If they're telling themselves to be the World Bank, that's a little concerning to me.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
So that's the only thing that
they're at least trying to compete.
So, that's what it just sounds like. It kind of can be, but in what way? Like, are they actually going to do something that is actually beneficial to these countries, or is it like, what the World Bank does?
I think they just want to hold their money. Well, what do we need to give you for us to hold your money? That's what this is, in my opinion. And that's what banks do. So it's one thing if you keep track of your banks and how they operate and how they, like some other countries tend to, especially with China and Russia, right? Because the government doesn't want to get ripped off in those situations. So, but you essentially, each country would have to be on it as far as, are they getting the best deal out of it, right?
Right.
So the new development bank has already issued bonds denominated in China currency, the renminbi. Chinese Vice President Ding Zhuijiang said at the annual meeting of the BRICS Bank that NDB is designed to better serve the emerging economies by financing more infrastructure construction and sustainable projects. Okay, you've talked about this as well, correct? So Rousseff's view that the world is transitioning toward a multipolar currency order has been acknowledged even by some Western mainstream media outlets and analysts. The chair of this editorial board of the Financial Times newspaper, Gillian Tett, implored investors in March to prepare for a multipolar currency world. Okay? So, prominent economist Zoltan Pozsar, dude, that sounds like a wizard. You can't throw Zoltan Pozsar in here and not expect me to be like, that's a wizardy woo boy, wrote in the Financial Times in January that the unipolar era of U.S. hegemony is over and is placed with a multipolar order of one world, two systems, and possibly more. Pozar, whom the financial press dubbed a superstar, noted that the pace of de-dollarization appears to have picked up, with more and more BRICS curious countries trading in their own currencies. What does it also mean for our currency, Collin? Yeah. So what does that mean for your, I don't even know what you would call it. Like your worth, your own dollar's worth, like a lot of that goes away. Your real estate's worth less, like all that shit.
It takes away the power of US dollar. It doesn't hold the same weight. You know, it just makes me think about like when I've traveled to Africa. It's not to say I don't use a national currency depending on what country that I'm in, but sometimes depending on where I'm at, like I'll say this, like usually if I take a taxi, especially if I'm coming from the airport, oftentimes they prefer that you pay them in US dollars.
Sure. Because that's what they're used to getting, right?
They're used to getting it, but it holds more weight.
Yeah.
In terms of it has more value than
do some evening out.
Their own currency. So, but leveling out the playing field in this way, you know, elevates the local currency back up and takes some power away from the US dollar. Now, I'm not a money guy, but just thinking of that, while it sounds good in theory, how that's going to work in practice, especially given like a country like China that holds a good chunk of power with their currency right now over, let's say, I don't know, like I want to say Egypt. Like what it would be interesting to see how they're going to figure that part out, especially with the countries that are coming in that are new against countries like basically the original five that hold a lot more weight. So that'll be kind of interesting. And again, I don't know finances, especially, you know, like international currency in that way. So, but yeah, I think it's just that's my concern is like how they're going to even out the level playing field with multi currencies, and then obviously with certain countries that obviously have a lot more strength in their currencies compared to others. That's kind of where my wonder is.
So if less trade is invoiced in US dollars and there's a dwindling recycling of dollar surpluses into traditional reserve assets such as treasuries and gold, right? Gold has been a thing with this, like
I love gold,
which is why US wants to get its hands on Gold Coast places and, you know,
Gold Coast, Uganda, which I'll be very interested to see if Uganda
shows up to BRICS if they join the battle. So, that the dollar holds as the international reserve currency could be under assault, Pozar warned. Unlike the World Bank, the New Development Bank is a truly multilateral institution, not one dominated by a lone power. The 2014 funding agreement stated that the NDB's initial subscribed capital shall be equally distributed among the founding members, and the voting power of each member shall equal its subscribed shares in the capital stock of the bank. Okay? Which, you know, probably leads to whoever holds more shares has more play, right?
Right.
So, but no country has veto power in the NDB. The NDB founding agreement likewise stated the president of the bank shall be elected from one of the founding members on a rotational basis, and there shall be at least one vice president from each of the other founding members. So they're trying to like keep it, you know, everyone gets a say to this, right? As opposed to like what the World Bank does and just leaves it to like one dude, right?
Right.
So the World Bank is completely different. This institution is essentially controlled by us and physically headquartered in Washington, D.C. The bank clearly states on its website that the United States remains the largest shareholder of the World Bank Group today, right? Boasting that as the only World Bank Group shareholder that retains veto power over certain changes in the bank's structure, the United States plays a unique role in influencing and shaping global development priorities, yada, yada, yada. The bank's website likewise admits traditionally the World Bank president has always been a U.S. citizen nominated by the United States. Okay? So, the United States has 15.81% voting power in the World Bank's group lending arm, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. No other country even remotely comes close, Collin. Right? There's that little graph. Look at this graph. In second place in voting power is Japan with 7.22%. Despite having 4 times the U.S. population, China has a vote share of just 5.6%. Germany has 4.3% and Britain at 3.8%. India, with a population of more than 1.4 billion, is tied with France, which has a population of less than 66 million. Each has 3.81% of the voting power in the World Bank. Russia has a mere 2.8%. Canada has 2.56%, and Italy 2.5%. So this is also a way for China to just back out and Russia to back out of an option for them and have more power elsewhere. So they'll take it. They'll go, yeah, sure. So here's World Bank Group finances, right? Here's how much is in there, right? We got United States with that much, 43,847.5. What is this in? I can't tell. Is there like, I would think that would be in like billion. Oh, this is their voting power. Got it.
That's the
okay. Cool.
Zoom in. Yeah, so obviously the United States has almost half of the voting power. Well,
yep. There's those percentages, 16 point something. Yeah. They hold the most compared to everyone else.
Right.
But yeah. So the World Bank acts as a kind of neo-colonial institution dominated by the Western powers. It is not so much the World Bank as it is the Washington Bank, along with its Bretton Woods financial sibling, the International Monetary Fund, which is similarly dominated by the U.S. The World Bank is notorious for trapping Global South countries in odious debt. So when debtor countries are unable to pay back the World Bank, the U.S.-controlled institution frequently imposes harsh neoliberal economic policies as part of a structural adjustment program, requiring governments to cut social services, lower wages, slash pensions, reduce spending on healthcare and education, end subsidies, privatize state-owned enterprises, and deregulate markets. So why do you think those countries suck, Collin? Is it because we told them to suck?
Right.
Because they owe us monies?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yet we take their resources, right? Former consultant John Perkins.
Bring them into debt. So it's funny. It's funny now that you say this, because it's like China, and you can make the argument for China has been criticized for doing this, like putting African countries into certain African countries into debt. But no one ever talks about how the World Bank is involved in putting these countries in the U.S., putting these countries in debt. I don't want to also, but you know what I mean. Like,
oh, I do.
It's always the criticism of China, but never on the U.S. for doing, I would argue, worse stuff. Because at least with China, you can make the argument that they're actually elevating
and giving them power. Like they are giving them power, like in this economic situation.
And taking like a lot of these programs away.
Yep.
And putting them in.
Yep. For sure. I mean, you see that with this, you know, like the fact that they're giving them You get a vice president automatically.
Right.
As a founding member, you get a VP. So I don't know how much influence that'll have over your country's debt, but it's something. So,
right.
Yeah, but so John Perkins, in his book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, described the World Bank as an agent of global empire that helps cheat poor countries in the global south out of trillions of dollars and subsequently funnel money into the coffers of huge corporations and the pockets of a few wealthy families who control the planet's natural resources. Perkins added that the economic hitmen at the World Bank and similar U.S.-dominated institutions play a game as old as empire. So, I mean, classic stuff, pretty much.
Well,
we'll see.
This is kind of sad because a lot of my families at my school work for the World Bank.
Yep.
So.
And your other friends in other countries are going.
Let me call the Russians to help.
Like they're, and they got the ability to. They're willing to make friends right now. So.
But in either case, shout out to BRICS.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see basically all these other countries running to be a part of this. And I'm sure more will be coming in the pipeline. So again, their conference is next month. So we definitely are going to report on that when that happens. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting year, I think, in terms of the beginnings of essentially a new superpower to kind of counter the World Bank. But I also would argue to counter NATO as well.
For sure.
So, it'll be very interesting to see how this develops over the next few years. But yeah.
Yeah.
Go BRICS.
Yeah, go BRICS. Do it. Do it up.
I mean, like, I'm cautious, obviously, given just in them saying like they're not saying model themselves after the World Bank, but given that they want to, I'm still wondering what that means for them in terms of what does that look like for you. But so I think that's the thing that I'm a little curious about. But I think the difference is that they have other countries involved in this. So obviously there has to be a lot more negotiating in that. So I think that in itself seems to be promising, but my concern, but question is how the larger countries that have the most wealth are going to counter the smaller ones that don't have as much.
For sure.
Where's that compromise / balance there?
And I think they've made some steps towards that, at least in this regard. We'll see. I'm sure more would help.
Right.
So, and I think as you start to see things even out with BRICS, as far as how that monetary, I mean, they said that all the foundies get equal share, so we'll see. But I think once the countries start to balance some of that wealth, it should, I don't know, hopefully it should do something well for them,
Right.
So
we'll see.
For sure. Stay tuned to this very channel. We'll keep you informed. So which we got more stuff coming up this week. We got what's up next? Bread and Circuses Thursday.
This is for Chris tomorrow. Angel in the afternoon. And is Tara going live on Friday?
No idea yet, but stay tuned to our, all our socials, especially our Twitter, to keep an eye on that.
Angel in the afternoon on Friday, 2:15. Bitch with Comrade Misty on Saturday.
Yeah.
How We Missed Out with you and Indy on Sunday night. And boats smashing in the other boats. So basically, you clip out.
Yep, we take out what we do live Sunday and put it in the next Friday in case you miss it.
Right.
So
right. Politically Homeless next Monday.
Jeez, homeless.
No American Tradition, I imagine, next week since Jesse was on.
I heard we might get a Tatami video. So maybe that'll happen. We'll see.
Maybe. And then next week we'll be back and we have special guest, very close friend to the show, and glad we get the opportunity to have him here while he's on tour, but DJ Joe Nice.
And it'll be episode 69. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh,
gonna be a great episode. What we look? I can be a child if I want to.
A 12-year-old.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Anyway, it's all good. But we have 23 people watching. I think our highest amount was 25. So I guess a lot of you are coming in late. Thank you guys for joining us after the other streams tonight. Please watch the first half if you came a little later. But appreciate you guys coming on, supporting us, and do the thing. Like the stream before you leave. Share the stream or watch it yourselves if you came in late. Subscribe to us. Thank you guys. We've been having steady growth. Also check to make sure that you are subscribed, because YouTube can do some mess and unsubscribe you. So please check periodically that you are subscribed to us, so you are able to be notified of when our shows go live. And continue to watch us through the weekend and into next week for clips.
And go check out Indy was on Hardlands. I'm sure they're going to put clips out of that. So go check those out when you get a chance. And you can find all the links to all of us at indienews.network. We're all there, as well as all the little things on screen now that you can find for me and Collin. But everything's in the description below if if you're lazy and you don't want to type stuff. So, anything else? Is that it? I
think so.
Okay. Well, as always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Bye, have a great time.